Salutations! Thank you for tuning into our webinar, Better Ways to Use Technologies to Improve Seafarer Training and Skill Development. Our guest speakers are Captain Pradeep Chawla, CEO of MarinePals, Farhat Abul, CEO and founder of Stella, and Ral Harris, Chief Creative Officer of OTG. If you have any questions for them, please leave them in the Q&A section for answering later on, and feel free to upvote. And here's Matt Stevens, Digital Ships Editor, to start the talk. Take it away, Matt.
Thanks, Farah. Today's session will focus on seafarer training and how the maritime industry's use of modern technology and learning techniques is transforming it. In recent years, there has been changes to the maritime industry's approach to education and skill development. New technologies like virtual reality, data analytics, and microlearning are already reshaping the way seafarers learn and perform. Today, we will explore how these innovations are addressing some of the key challenges in maritime training, making it safer, more efficient, and more personalised. Our first speaker will be Pradeep Chawla, CEO at MarinePals, joining from Mumbai. Pradeep is the Managing Director for Quality, Health, Safety, and Environment for Training at Anglo Eastern Ship Management. Pradeep will speak on the shortening of attention spans, cadets learning techniques in the form of 7-minute videos, the use of VR, and the gamification of learning. Our second speaker is Ral Harris, Chief Creative Officer at Ocean Technologies Group, the world's largest maritime e-learning company. Ral, who is joining from the UK, will focus on how companies manage learning and culture building through human capital management strategies. Our final speaker is Farhat Abul, CEO and co-founder of Stella, joining from Istanbul. Farhat has 20 years of experience in quality assurance, ship management, and maritime safety. He will speak on how technology is evolving, the use of AI and machine learning, and how such technology can impact the effectiveness of training systems. Today's session will be divided into 3 10-minute presentations, followed by audience questions during a 30-minute Q&A session. Please post your questions in the chat bar alongside the name of the speaker you would like to answer your question during the presentations. So let's begin. Pradeep, please share your screen now.
Good morning, everyone. And Matt, thanks for having me on this webinar. And I shall start immediately. Just a correction while we wait. I was with Anglo Eastern, but I have retired from that job at the very young age of 66. And so now I am doing this MarinePals. Okay, let's start. So give me a second to, yep. So yes, we are all in the business of knowledge sharing, training, education. And knowledge has always been something that human beings have desired from the time we have been on the planet. And we are talking about technology. So I wanted to start with a little bit of history of how technology has always played a part in how we educate the next generation and how we learn. So in the cave days, we had these little drawings telling people on how to hunt animals. We then moved on to writing on different kinds of leaves. The center one is what was being done in India. They would write these on little folding paper and tie them up with strings and 2 pieces of wood. And around the same time, Egypt was writing them on papyrus leaves. And then, of course, we invented the printing press, and we invented books, and we invented libraries. And unfortunately, we invented examinations. So from teaching under a tree, as Socrates and Plato and all the Indian gurus would do, teaching and learning became something that you ended up doing examinations and assessments. And today our brains are so wired up that all of us who are providing these kind of services are always quite often asked, but how do we assess? We do 90% of our learning in life without being assessed on a daily basis. I mean, ask any married person, What happens if you put your wet towel on the bed? What really happens in daily life is you get a scolding from your wife. And this happens 3 times, and then you never ever forget. And you never ever put the wet towel on the bed. So we didn't have an assessment, but we had clear feedback, very quick one, which made a difference. Let's go down to the next stage. Then we invented classrooms, and the classroom has also kind of evolved as technology evolved. We started with blackboards, then we went on to whiteboards, then we went on to little television screens within the classroom and a bit more of the hands-on kind of stuff with for the little kids to experience the learning rather than only listen to the boring teacher. And then we moved on to computers, and now the little imagination of mine on the lower right-hand corner, that's what a future classroom will look. And the teacher could be sitting in any part of the world like we are doing now on this webinar. We then moved on to the internet revolution, and of course the same thing happened. Education industry immediately adopted to learning using the internet, and then we had the birth of the Udemy and Coursera and Khan Academy kind of huge portals. And that's what all of us now try to do, that everybody has a learning management system, which is now even available on the ships. We then moved on to the era of internet spawning these huge search engine companies and later on the video companies. And search engine today is the main way that every student learns. We gain possibly 90% of our new knowledge by just searching on the Google or Bing. And if we see the behavior of age groups 12 onwards, quite often they don't want to use Google because it's all text and boring. So they prefer to search for things, for new knowledge on YouTube. And just the fact that the statistics show that there are 30 billion views, that shows how much of the learning is being done by through the YouTube, right? And I was trying to get rid of the bar at the bottom, but that didn't happen because I couldn't read that uh, what I was presenting. Okay, moving on. I think we are also now in an age where we are producing a lot of data, a lot of knowledge is being created. Yeah, some of us are write good stuff and some writers don't write very good stuff, but it is all adding to this body of knowledge that the humans are creating. And IBM estimates that we create more knowledge now in 2 years than we have done in the previous, millenniums. So education and learning is getting affected by that. And we all are now in a phase where we are trying to see that how do we use this? How do we, so from an era when we had very little information and we had to go to a library to search for knowledge in a book, we have now reached a situation that we have too much of data, too much of knowledge, and we need to be able to filter out what's really relevant and what's fake news, as Trump would call it. So the problem statement has also changed from a lack of knowledge or sharing of knowledge to sharing or finding appropriate knowledge at the appropriate time. And that's where the search engines, etc., come in. And this other behavior aspect that has changed is that we invented things like Facebook and Instagram and TikTok. People now feel that that's another way of learning. And if we see the number of views that are happening on each of these platforms, it's obvious. I mean, if you take any 15-year-old today, it's very unlikely that they are going to be doing any reading of a Wall Street Journal or a New York Times. Most of them absorb their new knowledge through headline news, more so on Instagram, possibly because Facebook is for the oldie people. And now it's TikTok and Instagram and Telegram and whatever else. And the education and learning business has to then adapt itself to looking at these platforms. Uh, the workforce, that is our audience of seafarers, who are the ones who operate ships and for whom we create all this knowledge in order to run ships and the business of maritime industry, that workforce is changing. I mean, my generation, most of us are kind of retired. And then even if you see the millennials, they're just 35% now. And it's the Gen X and the Gen Z that are there. So my generation of boomers is only 6% of the workforce in 2020. So 5 years later, now it's probably 3%. What do these young people do? They spend about 7 hours a day on the screens. They use social media all the time. We believe, and I think there is a research from King's College in London that 49% of the UK population agrees that the span of attention of everybody is reducing. There was a little bit of fake news about some research that Microsoft did, which said that the average span of a young person now is 8.25 seconds, which is less than the goldfish, which is incorrect. It was proven wrong, but just because Microsoft did that research paper, it's still all over the internet. But believe me, if it's an attractive video going on the screen, we all do binge watching of Netflix or Amazon or whatever, right? So it's not really 9.25 seconds, etc. But it's a fact that we are moving on to content which is smaller. So the problem that we are all addressing now is that we need information at the point of need because students are wanting it at that time. A lot of the students are only reading during the weekends and in the evenings. 41% of them are on their desk when they are looking for new knowledge, and hence the Google and the YouTube search. And lunchtime learning and learning on the way in the tube, which I believe in London gives you lots of opportunities because it's perennially late. Sorry, Ral, but yeah, every time I travel, that's what happens. So in the maritime industry, we have been accused that we are slow at adopting technology. I think that is changing rapidly. Possibly 15 years ago, I would have agreed with it, but now with AI tools and whatever else, digitalization that is coming into shipping, I don't think that is true anymore, that we are slower. It is a small industry and difficult to find that right content for us. I mean, if you find on YouTube, you try to find maritime topics. Usually it's like put out by individuals, a second officer somewhere, a third engineer somewhere, uh, putting on something where most of the content is with them in the frame, which is more like gaining popularity rather than thinking about how do I transfer this knowledge in the right way. And so we are all kind of, in our industry, we do have a need for more modern ways of education. And just a little bit, and I'm sure Ral will kind of say the same kind of similar things. So some of us are as providers are providing it in a modern way. I mean, that's just the interface of what we do in a mobile app and web app, etc. I'm not going to try and explain anything. For that, you need to call me to your office for a session. But the point I want to make is micro learning is something that I started in Anglo Eastern in 2019 in a big way. And I think it's popular. The seafarers give very good feedback about shorter content. We are all adapting virtual reality training programs. It does look very realistic walking into a 4-peak tank now and learning points being explained by a virtual tutor. We are all experimenting with games a little slower than I would say in other industries because the maritime industry budgets in the training, and I'm sure all of us three on this panel will all want the ship owners to have much bigger budgets for training so that we can give them, multi-user games across continents that students could play. But at the moment, that's pretty much not a big part of our industry. Simulators, I would call it in technology-based learning, and these are progressing pretty quickly. From full-scale mock-ups, we are all kind of experimenting with cloud-based simulators. Me personally, we tried it out. In Anglo, we were the first company to do it in COVID times. But what I am seeing is that the teachers are preferring to go back to full mock-up because there are some disadvantages. I should be done pretty quickly. 3 more slides. Use of artificial intelligence. Of course, this is going to be the future, and we are all still learning on how to utilize it properly. But we do need to understand the implications of it. Here is a little experiment that I did with, on a question, how would you explain metacentric height to an 18-year-old cadet? And I wouldn't call this as sufficient of what is normally done in a Southampton college or any maritime college. So there are still areas there need improvement. It does help in finding better teacher resources, improving lesson content, and of course, something that all teachers hate is grading exams. It does help in that. And there will be in the future personalized AI tutoring, maybe a bit slower in the maritime industry compared to others. But we are extending the knowledge beyond books because now we are including everything in the search engines. But the challenges of AI need to be aware of. Training data, garbage in, garbage out. So right now, I feel that for the maritime industry, it's going to take a bit longer because, it's a very small industry, 1.6 million seafarers. Who listens to us? The politicians don't care about us. So it's going to take a lot more investment into training data. There is a bit of fake data around. The models are getting biased with the kind of information that is presently available. And it is very easy to make a model hallucinate if the queries are written in a way. Quite often, these models, they have basically hallucinate because they never say, I don't know. They always try to give you an answer. And quite often, that's not the correct answer. So that's my kind of overview on how technology has always helped in training. And it will continue to evolve with AI and with machine learning, etc. And I believe that as an industry, we are at the right inflection point to adopt technology, and which basically means I'm praying that more people will buy products from all of us training providers. So with that, I will end and let's get on to the next presentation. Thank you very much, and I will stop sharing in a second.
Brilliant. Thank you, Pradeep.
Yeah, thanks.
And yeah, if Raul, could you share your screen now?
Hello. Yeah, sure. 1 second, and I'll be with you. Good. Hopefully you can see my screen. Is that my presentation up?
Yeah, I can see that.
Good. All right. Good. I'll get going. Thanks. Always a tough act to follow. Raul Harris, I'm Chief Creative Officer at Ocean Technologies Group, and about 75% of the group that we have at the moment is around maritime e-learning, and that's my background as well. Around 20 years creating and working with learning technologies and creating content and all that sort of stuff. So I'll try and give you a couple of perspectives on where we are now and approaches that we can take going forward. So I think that the important thing is this is a moment in the industry where we really need to start thinking about how we approach all this stuff, mainly because the amount of pressures that we're under now. We've got twin sort of challenges: digitalization very much here in progress, and decarbonisation, which is coming over the hill with a huge amount of new sort of things to understand for our seafarers, skills to acquire. And in the meantime, we've got various kind of societal pressures, the way in which generations are changing, Pradeep alluded to there, the focus on welfare, all of these kind of things. We're expecting more and more from our seafarers in terms of what we need them to achieve. And at the same time, we're seeing pressure on crewing, on finding. So there's no real shortage of the number of people who want to be seafarers, but there's a real shortage of those with the right skills that can take our industry forward. And what that means for us is that we really got to start to think not just about kind of doing learning as a kind of like tick box exercise, we're about to this is safety critical, so we have to do X, Y, Z safety training things before we get started, to moving to the kind of human capital management approach that you can see kind of outlined there on the screen. And what that really means is that we start to think about people as fundamentally being an asset that are able to help us to meet our organizational goals. And we look at what we want to achieve as an organization. We look at all the different skills that are needed, or those key competencies that are going to be needed to deliver on that organization that we need. And then that then informs us the kind of way in which we bring people in, right from recruitment to the way we onboard them, to the way we develop their skills and assess their performance. And ultimately, if we're going to do all of that, if we're going to invest in them into that degree, how we're going to keep those people into the organization, and that we're doing that from a data perspective so that we understand what goes in, what comes out, basically, so we can see we have a problem in the business. We think of it as a learning can be solved by a piece of learning, for example. We deploy that learning, and then we can see that result and see if that kind of happens. And there's a whole lot more to that sort of human capital management approach than that, but I've put that up on the screen if you want. That's a free report that we did last year that will give you a bit more of an idea. And today we're really looking at that learning and development side of things. And key to that learning and development approach is the learning management system. That's kind of like a staple that you're going to need if you're going to try this sort of technique at all. And that's really a place where we can find learning. So a learning locker, a resource that our people can go to if they need to find information. But it's also typically a means as well to schedule and to record learning activity. And so in so doing, sort of create that data picture. And if we think about the history of that, it's really interesting in terms of the tools that are available to us. Right back in the 70s, the start of a company that I started working for back in 2004 was already well established then, a company called Videotel, and they had these boxes of training films. And so as a training manager, you didn't really have much you could tell other than some people were in a room and they watched a video. And that's then became through things like computer-based training. We got assessments. Through an onboard LMS, we're then getting to that sort of stage where we can start to schedule and see and report on that activity. That then moved into the cloud and allowed us to collect all of that fleet information in one place, start to see trends there. And then with mobile apps, we suddenly get a completely different additional layer there, because it's a relationship between a person and a device. We can start to tell things about their preferences. Also opens up the ways in which they can access that information from sort of just-in-time learning point of view. And then where we are today is this kind of enterprise level SaaS, software as a service, where it's ubiquitous everywhere. So wherever learning is happening, we can kind of record on it and we can start to build that picture. And it's not just that the learning there exists in isolation as well. It's part of an ecosystem, a connected maritime ecosystem of all sorts of learning activities in terms of, third-party stuff, the company's own materials, a manufacturer-specific training. You've got VR in there, simulator exercises, cloud simulation comes, virtual classroom, all of those different elements are all kind of able to unite together. But then we can look at those in the backdrop of all the other kind of data that might come in there as well, about performance analytics around how the company is actually doing, things like their planned maintenance record. What can you tell from is happening in the learning space, and then what's actually happening to your equipment, all that sort of stuff, voyage system, all that kind of stuff. And it gives us this kind of ability to look at everything in the round, if you like, and to design things like, it's not a new concept, but the idea of building competency. So instead of just random sort of training tick box kind of events, we're thinking about a program of learning that we can undertake, we can take people on to get to an end result. And that could be a certificated course, which is made up of lots of different, that signifies a kind of the passing through of a whole bunch of sort of educational materials. Or it could be that these are proficiencies that you then want to associate with a job role and see people move through a kind of a progression. And of course, with competency management system, that's not like something that kind of is done once and finished. It's something that's continually being reviewed, and you're looking at that sort of cycle going through. But within that process of kind of designing all those kind of learning activities, you're not just kind of getting people to kind of take a computer-based training test. You can have physical demonstrations in there. You can have kind of mentoring sessions and so on. And this is why when we look at the real benefits of a competency management system and a competency management system approach, we start to see that it's fundamental to that human capital management approach of setting the right culture within an organization. And it creates a whole bunch of opportunities for the right sort of behaviors to build that culture. So don't take my word for it. The quote that you're seeing on screen comes from this document, which was written by Intertanko and Okim, about behavioral competency assessment and verification for vessel operators. And the quote there, I'll just read it out for you. Competency frameworks offer a structured approach to managing, appraising, and improving performance by reinforcing values and encouraging a common culture. And that common culture is really one of so not just individual competency, but organizational competency, as you're able to sort of create the right place in which people can do their jobs and can thrive. And what the other thing this document does that's really key is it says it's not just about technical abilities, that we also need to have the same sort of approach to evaluation of softer skills. And those softer skills really drive and power that sort of culture building approach. And this is a snapshot of data, which is recorded from all of our sort of users in our system. And it's looking at what I was interested to look at here was how many of the kind of titles that are tagged against those kind of well-being or bullying and harassment, that kind of positive culture, leadership, all those kind of important soft skills, and just looked at, is there a trend that we can see of those kind of rising? And of course, we can see that as well, because more and more organizations are seeing that as part of the mix in terms of how we take competence development forward. But it does give us a problem, because if we're going to start to say, right, there's not just all these technical things that they need to know, they've got new systems coming on board, we need to train them on that. We've got company policies, we need to train them on that. We've got charterers requirements who are asking for X, Y, Z, we've got to train them on that. We're loading up more and more and more learning that needs to happen for that individual to be able to get on. So what could we do? And I think one of the interesting things that we've got, and we're certainly looking at, is adaptive learning. And what you're looking at there is the simple concept that you can see on the right of the screen, where we've got an individual moving towards a designated learning goal. But the pathway that they go through that may be different depending on that individual and what they need to know. And so on the left there, you can see that it's a very simple kind of loop that we would start with an assessment. So rather than do the learning, have the assessment at the end, we do the assessment at the beginning, which gives us an opportunity to find out where that individual is at. We can then run that gap analysis against everything that that goal represents, that we want them to know. And then we generate that learning pathway that's right for them and concentrates just on the gaps of what they need to fill. So with competency management, typically the way that works, you've got this structured set of proficiencies, and everybody at rank X goes through everything. And this approach is slightly different. It's us saying, we know what those proficiencies, that learning that needs to be demonstrated for those proficiencies, but we're going to check first to see if they already know that before we automatically put them through that pathway. And so really, this is an opportunity for the learning, the machinery, the technology to really do some of that heavy lifting. And instead of the gap analysis being conducted by a human being, it's conducted by a piece of software. And for that to happen, there needs to be a different kind of approach to both the way your content is structured and the metadata behind that content, so that these things can occur. Now, this is like a traditional sort of learning module that you might be looking at there. Normally, there's some sort of introduction to it, and then there'll be a number of units. So there's nothing unusual in this. But the unusual part in terms of what this means for content creation is that when we take each of those elements, we make sure that each of those elements, those learning units, can stand up completely on its own. So it's very contained, it very tightly knows exactly what learning objectives is associated with it. And as you can see in that fourth example there, the learning unit before the end is a mixture of the content and the assessment questions. So those assessment questions being very, very tightly bound to that learning objective there. And what does this give you? What this fundamentally gives you is that all of the content, if it's broken down in this way and the metadata is clear for each of those elements, is essentially learning Lego. So you can have a box of learning Lego, all these different learning objectives, which you can then use to create the right sort of pathway through for an individual. So you can take any of the tasks that you might want that person to play, any of those knowledge gaps that are required to undertake a certain task for you on board or within the organization, and build that pathway for them in the most efficient way possible. So, conscious of time, just a few things to think about. Bring it back to the top. People being really key to the success, and we've got to have a completely different approach into the way that we kind of manage them and think about their learning as what happens to support our organizational goals. And that being both not just a learning activity, but also a cultural activity as well. So thinking about how that's all communicated, supported, how they're onboarded and all that stuff into the organization, and made clear what you want to do, how you want them to participate to be successful. And then building with the right combination of the learning tools there to make it much more personal, to use technology, leverage technology in the way it can approach metadata, and of course the compartmentalization of all the content to allow you to create really personalized learning journeys for the individual. And that's pretty much it from me.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Raul. Farhat, if you would like to share your screen for us.
Sure. Let me do it. All right. While doing that, I think my voice is okay, right, Matt? Are you able to hear me well?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Very, very good. So let's share my screen. And confirm that you are receiving the full mode, presentation mode. In a minute. There we go.
Yeah. That's all good.
Very good. Okay. So first of all, thank you very much to Digital Ship for giving that opportunity. I think it's really good to be here. My presentation for the next 10 minutes will be a kind of summary after Captain Pradeep's and Raul's presentation, and then we'll be ready for the questions. So today's topic is a quite important one. Before going into that, let me a little bit introduce myself. Farhat Abul is my name. I've been working in shipping since 2005, so 20 years in different parts, mainly as an auditor, surveyor, quality assurance and training director for a tanker company. And now I'm one of the founders of Stella. So seafarers are in the heart of shipping business, and well-trained, highly competent seafarer mean a lot with respect to the personnel safety and environmental protection. Those are both the objectives of any safety management system. Before covering the improved ways of seafarer training, let's have a look into the changes in the maritime domain. I think that was touched upon briefly in the previous presentations as well, saying that expectations of various stakeholders have been changing. Owners, charterers, terminals, authorities are with detailed requirements, especially with respect to technical and operational matters. Ship owners are investing on new technologies either to fulfill such requirements on or run ships in the most cost-effective way to be placed well in the global market. In addition to that, especially since 5 to 7 years, I would say, it's obvious that we have more and more focus to environmental compliance, and that also brings new training requirements to understand and better implement the same. In addition to maritime domain changes, what about the changes in modern education systems? There is more technology now in training systems, that's for sure. Digital learning environments, virtual reality, AI-driven training specifically prepared for based on needs of individuals. And above are a few of the key changes in the modern education systems compared to the traditional ones. And why to focus on technology then? Seafarer training is not just following traditional ways in order to cope with challenges we just covered a couple of minutes ago. Talking about effective trainings and considering the new generations, the difference in between seafarers' professional educational background, which is quite different than each other, we cannot just deliver a standard training to everyone. That's the reason why assessing the seafarers' competencies, skills, and tailoring the trainings. I think the word tailoring here is a key word, which we will spend a little bit time on. Tailoring the trainings by using technology is a must. In addition, technology obviously is not only improving the quality of the trainings, but also creates a great accessibility by today's remote connection facilities. Limit access to training centers due to their physical availability or inavailability in certain parts of the world, or a remote location of training centers. High travel costs are a few other challenges today. It's also difficult to have standard quality of trainings with an agreed scope, which normally shouldn't change from training center to another one. Traditional ways of training may not always match the theoretical knowledge with required practical skills and may not provide a hands-on experience. That's the reason why it's necessary to adopt new technologies into seafarers training systematics. Changes, updates in ship systems are also so fast that without a new technology in training, it's very difficult to build an effective training content and motivate seafarers to follow training requirements. So now, let's have a look into some of the technologies and the role of such technologies in maritime training. So e-learning platforms, as already touched upon, are the most common environments that bring so many advantages, such as remote access to a training from anywhere, anytime. A well-designed LMS also makes the training interactive with videos, animations. I think we have seen brilliant examples during the previous presentations already. Simulation-based trainings is another one. Helps the seafarer to work on realistic scenarios applicable to the particular ship, not a generic one, or helps to experience even emergency support situations, which is an important element of the ISM code, a mandatory management system standard in maritime. Virtual reality, creates immersive environment that enables to test the knowledge or improve the experience in real-world scenarios. And it's not only VR, we also have AR, augmented reality, is another enhanced interactive version of a real-world environment achieved through digital visual elements, sounds, and any other sensory technology. Imagine to have holograms of an alarm monitoring system in front of you, or control units of a newly installed system on board the ship in front of you. Very realistic. So you can try certain scenarios as much as you want, gain experience before going on board for the real operation, or do mistakes as you do and learn from them. Gamification obviously increases the engagement by creating competition among seafarers. Even a simple questionnaire-based games, I think we have some in the market already, helps a lot. And the role of AI, I'll spend a little bit of time on it. Considering the technology of today, using AI would be the most effective way of assessing the needs of an individual seafarer and design the training content accordingly. Rather than a standard content, AI can even predict based on seafarers' performance or replies either during a training session or as a result of an actual onboard assessment. Using AI and the data in machine learning keeps the training content automatically up to date, not stable all the times, and not same training all the time, which could be named as continuous improvement as exactly required by the ISM code. AI and the machine learning are the most effective way of delivering trainings, but it's not only the way that we deliver trainings, it's also to identify the training needs for all levels in the organization. Another ISM terminology, all levels. So by using such technology, that will be really easy to fulfill the requirements of the industry from the mandatory point of view. That's exactly what we do in WISE-Tele platform as well, assessing seafarers either during a standard WISE scenario, that's what we call it, or a new company-specific operational scenario, which could be created from scratch, and record the results under the different competency domains. The system gives the results of each assessment in the most simple way. I think simplicity is another keyword here. if we are talking about technology. And that enables, the system enables comparisons within the company or benchmark within the industry. The trends of the assessment can be very easily monitored so that the actions for the next training or the content of an existing training would be tailored after processing same in Wise AI tool. And it exactly closes the individual gap for that seafarer. It's obviously an advantage compared to traditional ways of trainings. Once such systems are in use, then it is much easier to give also real-time feedback to seafarers or track performance in a continuous pace as AI learns from the additional input and recommendations to provide the optimal solutions. But I think there is a key point here. I think Captain Pradeep touched upon it very well, that the even though it's a very good tool, not only for shipping, I think for many parts of the world, many industrial domains, the data that is processed in AI, I think we have to be careful there. And it's validation and verification. The AI outputs are always to be reviewed by experts, academicians, before tailoring a training or coming up an action item within the organization. So that is what we are really paying attention also in Wise AI team to validate the data. What else? Mobile apps, I think we had very good examples, and we will have it more and more in maritime domain as well. It gives very much linked to the accessibility. Training on the go, can reach the training content anywhere, anytime. Keeps the interactivity quite high. They are the portable resources, which we will see, I think, more and more enhanced models in the short period of time. So the best is, of course, not to go for one single solution, but to combine a few methods. Blending more than one method will have various advantages. So it will enhance the learning. Seafarers staying in the same system, high retention, means that that will let the companies to monitor the achievements of seafarers, update the training contents in the most effective way. Even though there's an initial cost for such digital solutions, whatever it is. In the midterm or in the long term, companies will definitely have benefits, not only from cost point of view, but also efforts like review and evaluation of training contents. So questions like, is that standard training really useful for my seafarer? Was it the one which I was looking for? Or will it improve my safety management system practices? We won't need to worry about such questions because it's a dynamic system. AI and machine learning keeps the monitoring process the most relevant data for your company while identifying the training needs. Practical arrangements for trainings, measuring the effectiveness. I think the technology we touched upon in the last 10 minutes in my presentation has, and the previous ones, has numerous benefits in that respect too. So before I close, few recommendations to share. As we have covered, there are many different methods of delivering trainings. Using a blended approach, review the outcome of certain trainings and get the data, and combine that data with regular seafarer assessment results. And when we put all those data into AI, then the seafarer specific training could be created, more accurate feedback could be given, which is obviously a better improvement. So using different technologies and assessing seafarers' individual needs with respect to technical and non-technical skills, and designing as well as delivering the trainings based on that approach makes a difference. That's all from my side. I think we are ready for the questions. I'll leave the floor to you, Matt, and I stop my sharing.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. If the speakers could all if you could turn your cameras on and your microphones on. We have a first question from Alistair Nisbet, who mentioned that Rule mentioned mentoring in passing. This seems to me critical to ensure e-learning is converted from theory to practice. Can the panelists say how mentoring sits in the various systems they have described? Perhaps we'll start with Pradeep.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And Alistair, good to hear from you. Haven't met you for a long time. We'll catch up. Yeah, mentoring will certainly have a pretty big role to play. And one of the problems that we do have now is that with the increased turnaround, a faster turnaround in ports, there is lesser time available for the traditional mentoring. And we all know about the book from Alex about the 10-minute challenge. And I do wish that every captain and every chief officer and chief engineer spends that 10 minutes, but it is a challenge. Uh, I think that's more of a company culture problem now uh, than really a fast turnaround problem also, because I do see that we had quite a bit of focus on this in Anglo Eastern, and we would allocate, mentees, especially at the junior level, to some of the people in the office. And with a little bit of encouragement on a regular basis, it does work. So one has to work on the organizational culture along in order to improve the mentoring on board. Thank you.
And Rule?
Yeah, and again, nice to hear your name, Asta. Yeah, I think the key thing is that obviously mentoring is inherently human, but I think what excites me about the bringing of technology into the mix is that we can start to actually make sure that human interaction is being recorded, and that those that are investing that time in mentoring, that is being rewarded, and that activity is being connected. So for me, I think that's what excites me about sort of competency management approach, and taking it to a digital competency management system, because it allows for you to sort of manage the workflow and that interaction between the end assessor and the assessee, which is a really, if you get it right, is a mentoring sort of activity, because you're asking that person to come in, see and how a person is approaching a task. It's a learning experience for the two, and it encourages that sort of mentoring to take place. The second thing is, Pradeep alluded to there, is time being such a massive factor. If you want to encourage mentoring, you've got to make space and time for it. And so I think, with so much going on board ship, I think it's crucial that you leverage as much technology and automation as possible to try and create more space for those kind of mentoring activities and one-to-one human interactions to take place.
Brilliant, thank you. And Farhat?
Yeah, mentoring should definitely be there, because I see it as an also experience exchange. It's not only to design a system or supervise, but obviously, as we touched upon during the presentations, mentoring and the outcome, if you blend it with technology, I think that makes it unique, and that is what the management system standards are looking for. Every shipping company is working on its own unique system. So obviously, to have mentoring in the most, let's say, effective way. What is the extent of mentoring? Where to step in, where to step out, and then also combining the outcome with the technology. I think that makes it much better. Yeah.
Okay. And another question for the three of you from Vinyak Mahola. How do we address concerns from seafarers who may be resistant to adopting new technology-based training methods? I think, especially in the context of maritime being seen as being slow to adopt a change. Yeah, I'd like to hear your view on that. Maybe start with Pradeep.
Thanks. It's been a problem for quite some time now about it, and the resistance to change is again something that is prevalent in society too. But with each generation, I think that gap between wanting to adopt new technology and wanting to get on to new technology is actually reducing. And I think with the Gen Z, we are reaching that point where they are very open to adopting. I mean, if you take a new platform, say like a new Telegram comes in place of WhatsApp, and everybody does go around trying it out very quickly. So I think that problem will kind of keep getting solved as we have younger people out at sea. And also, I think technology is evolving in a way that everything is more user friendly. If we all remember the UI UX of computer systems 25 years ago versus all the things that we do on our apps continuously now, everything is more user friendly. And that's the reason why even the most uneducated people of the world are adopting, digital payments. They're adopting other technologies that are making their life easier. So if the technology gets it right and makes it human-centric design, then I think the adoption will always go faster. Thank you.
And Rule?
Great to hear that. Another name on there, Vidak Mola. It's been too long, my friend. It'd be lovely to see you again. So I think that the key here, I'm not sure that there's any kind of resistance in terms of adopting technology, as Pradeep says. I think one of the things that I perceive is there is a perception with seafarers sometimes that they have their certificate of competency, and therefore they are competent, and what is all this kind of stuff that's being pushed towards them? So I think it's really key that we bring seafarers on this journey of understanding why all of us, not just seafarers, they're not out on their own, all of us need to get into this spirit of lifelong learning, to keep with the pace of change, to see with the way, and the key thing that's missing when I speak to a lot of people, the key thing is them understanding that training isn't just something that's being done over there and real life is happening here. The training is a direct enabler of you being able to do your job well and be able to progress your career. And again, that's why I come back to competency management. If they can see why contextually the learning that we're putting in front of them in whatever method that we're doing it is actually going to be instrumental in their ability to be able to perform in their job and further their career, then I don't think we'll have any trouble convincing people.
Thank you. And Farhat?
Yeah, I think here the keyword is to have a simplicity. I mean, as also Raul touched upon, it's a dynamic thing. I mean, it's not just to coming up with a training and then a seafarer goes through it, clicks it, joins the session, and then a certificate or whatever. Is not that. Most of the time, at least to my experience, having one training as a kind of preventive measure as a result of an incident or a third-party inspection or survey, and then another one, and then another one, makes the training metrics of the shipping companies quite extensive, and it becomes another burden for them to follow it up. In addition to that, if the design of the training, whatever technology is in use, is also complex, as Captain Pradeep also mentioned, is if it is not user-friendly, then it's another problem for the seafarers to follow. So I think as long as the training, the technology being used, also the content is simple, to the point, then I think we will not be talking about any kind of resistance or getting adapted to that by the seafarers as well.
Okay, brilliant. We have another question from Patrick Wheater. How can AI-based learning technologies reduce a seafarer's cognitive load rather than adding to it? And can it help improve human factor-related incidents? I think maybe Farhat, would you like to start with this one?
Yeah, AI is one of the solutions. I mean, it will help. Of course, as mentioned during the presentation, we have to be careful which data we process there. So as we have AI, imagine a smaller shipping company to an extensive one. I mean, there's a lot of data, a lot. It's not only inspection, surveys, audits, a lot of lessons learned, experiences, near misses, unsafe act conditions, and they are all parameters that we consider while deciding on the trainings. And if we do it manually, this way or the other, we miss something. But AI can take that part in a more structured way. And of course, once the data in AI is validated by experts and then verified, and then the solutions while designing a training or evaluating the outcome, I think that is quite helpful. But obviously, we have human in the center of this business, so there will be a human interaction physically. But AI can help improvement in that respect. So processing the data with already experienced situations, not only for your company, right, can take hundreds, thousands of data very easily and process it on behalf of you. I think that is obviously an improvement.
And Rule?
Yeah, I mean, this is a massive topic, and there's all sorts of ways in which AI will fundamentally change the way in which we approach everything. I think to kind of risk anything else, I'll try and stick to exactly the point that you made in the question there around the cognitive load. And I think that one of the things that AI does so brilliantly is to be able to assess and to peel through huge amounts of data and to be able to observe trends that, you know, a human being would take months and months and months to be able to do, and months of research. So I think where we'll start to see AI playing a part is in identifying where the learning isn't that great. Now, quite often, you know, if we're looking at the assessment side of things, it's a really good way of being able to, in that scenario I mentioned, where you've got a very tight coupling between the learning objectives and the assessment questions. If we start to see trends and so on with people getting a question wrong, it's probably a pretty good indicator that that part of the learning hasn't been particularly well designed and described. So things like that, I can imagine AI are going to have a big impact in being able to to get that. And then I think the other one is the sort of the push and the pull kind of learning. If you think about prescription learning, where you're kind of taking people through a very clear program, that's one thing. But the other side of learning is where the seafarer is looking for answers for a specific problem. So that's sort of much more of that sort of just-in-time learning that Pradeep was talking about. And that's where I think AI will make a massive difference in being able to kind of take people to exactly and understand the question they're answering and understand exactly what the right piece of information to present to them is to be able to answer their question. That's where I see the biggest benefit.
Thank you. And Pradeep?
Well, most points covered by Ral and Ferhat, but I would like to kind of give it a little bit of a different answer. Cognitive load and analysis of data and having pie charts and, you know, whatever crunching of the data, yes, of course, AI will do. But when it comes to accident prevention and human factor issues, which is a very broad term, as long as we are part of the system, whether the designer of the ship made a mistake or whether the manufacturer of the gasket on a chemical tanker didn't make it of the right material, human beings are somewhere in the chain. And I think there is actually a danger that AI is going to take people further away from human beings, from each other. Because when we start to rely too much on purely technology, what we miss out is the human interaction. And if I've had the fortune or misfortune of looking at incidents of Anglo Eastern for 32 years in that role, and I can say that this term 80% are caused by human error is something that is completely guides people in the wrong direction. In most industries, especially ours, we stop investigating when we say the human being failed. In reality, to prevent accidents due to the human factors, we need to start investigating when we say that the human being failed. And then we come into these other things. And I will also make a bold statement that more than 80% of the incidents are not caused by a lack of knowledge. And I would say, even in terms of lack of skill, possibly my statistics would be that even that is not a problem in more than 10 or 20% of the incidents. So all the others that the problems that happen, which are kind of broadly put as and human factors, is things like the perceived or real commercial pressure for time, distractions, giving too much of a workload to individual. So we need to address this in a broad way. The regulatory framework tells us the minimum number of seafarers to be put on a ship, and we all have a certificate on a ship. But go ask any seafarer in the world and he'll tell you, no, we don't have sufficient people on board. So the regulatory framework for that, unless that is changed or improved, we continue to going to have that human factor, which is one of the causes of the incidents. Pressure of time, whether real or perceived, it's all in the head of the individual. Same thing with all the other pressures that are there on a seafarer. I mean, if you take a chemical tanker being cleaned, every seafarer knows that there is a limited amount of time in which the charterer is expecting that to be cleaned. So they try to rush through things, which is against human factor accident prevention theory, right? So the ideal world and the real world, they clash, and there is always a clash between cost-effective safety and needed safety. And that balance, which we typically see in, the little lady of justice with a pair of scales, efficiency versus safety, that's always going to be something that will exist in all industries. So for prevention of human factors, AI will take part by reducing the cognitive load. However, all the other things that we need to do in order to focus on prevention of the factors that lead to human beings making mistakes, we will need to continue separately beyond the learning part. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pradeep. And thank you, Farat and Rule as well. It is now 11 o'clock, so that is all we have time for. But thank you to everyone in the audience, and thanks to our speakers. And I'm going to hand over to Farah.
Pardon me. Hello. So we'd like to thank our guest speakers, Captain Pradeep Chawla, Farhad Abul, and Ral Harris. If you've missed any of our questions on our Q&A, we'll be sending you contact details soon with a link to a recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel. Also, please feel free to fill in our survey. Join us on the 11th of February for our next webinar with ship decks. You can book for this on our website. Goodbye for now.